Grounded in awareness, strong and free refers to the strength that can come when we really know who we are on all of the different levels. Kaivalya is blessed aloneness, this spiritual realization that we are alone, that when we transition to the next world or when we transition into this one, that we come in alone and we leave alone. And through our lifetime, we're not alone. We're so impacted by the people that are around us, the world we live in, the conditioning, the relationships, and that understanding who we are and developing a more regulated nervous system is a big part of how we get to know the deeper layers of ourselves. We have a lot of fascination with our personal life, of course. And I'm not a proponent at all of spiritual bypassing, where people kind of skip out of this life and spend their time in bliss or trying to find experiences of bliss. I am experienced, though, in regulating my nervous system and in going into stillness and knowing that that's part of who we are. It's at the heart of who we are. And that almost always what we need to do is work with the obstacles to knowing that, to realizing that. And then what we come into, whatever words we might use for it, we have a realization that we are more than our life, more than our thoughts, more than our body, that we have all of those things and we are moving through life in our body, and that our true nature is stillness, and that our capital S self, our being, is ever pure, ever wise, ever free. So that's the real deal when we're working with spiritual awareness and spiritual depth. These are some quotes. Truth is not an idea or a belief. It is a recognition of what is real beyond egoic illusions. Egoic illusions is not terminology that I would use. I think we have a sense of what that refers to. Part of it is that we mistake ourselves as just being our personal life, the thoughts in our mind, that there's more to it than that. One of the reasons I like Adyashanti's teachings is that he's very practical. He's a deep enlightenment teacher, and he talks about the value of actually living that. So, living from truth means, on a personal life level, being deeply honest, open, and present. So, responding to life from awareness and by seeing through our conditioned patterns, ideas from other people primarily of how we should be, who we should be. What I've come to really see the benefit of is a regulated nervous system is how we get there. That's how we are able to, or we have the capacity to reduce the amount of hypervigilance, to reduce the amount of compulsion in our mind, the amount of resisting, like what we worked with a few weeks ago with Michael Singer. Resisting life as it is takes a lot of energy. And there are reasons why we do that. And how can we have that stability? So we need to heal somewhat from trauma. We need to see through the core deficiency beliefs and realize for ourselves that, in fact, there is nothing wrong with us. We're not somehow unlovable or not of some value. What we find as we do this healing work is that we have healed and are healing from a lot of those beliefs, from a lot of the harm and the fear that is caused by trauma in early life as well as when we go through. We recognize the inner critic and we are not so involved with that anymore. And we have a little bit more, or a lot more at times, space around our thoughts where we're not held hostage to the thoughts like what we used to be. Living life from this awareness, there's something that's helpful about knowing how to be skillful in life, daily life. And daily life is not all of that what there is, that there's more. The truth is that you already are what you are seeking. Let's sit with that for a moment. We must become expressions of, not consumers of realization. And he speaks about the emptiness, the dissolution of self, where some of our identification and our need to have things go a certain way starts to dissolve. And love, the compassionate connection with all of existence, that feeling of I am one. And sometimes we get that in meditation. Often it'll be when we're out in nature. Sometimes we'll have that as an ongoing experience in our life. Other times it feels a lot farther away. So we're trying to do this dance as honestly as we can. When I look into my past, I can really see how unskillful I was and how my mind was really taken over by catastrophic thinking and wanting to be accepted and feel acceptable, and also defying that. And I was really engaged in my personal life, and that was all that I knew. And yet, there were times, even during my young life, when I'd be out in the grass in the prairies looking at the sky, or I think we can all relate to times when we felt at home. The details would be different. But if you were to just sense into that for a moment, we have this feeling of connection with all existence, with the universe, with other beings, with the energy field. The truth is that you already are what you're seeking. What does that feel like? This last paragraph here about detaching from ego and the experience and belief of separateness, that's one piece of work. And as that starts to fall away, we know and realize the self, and we operate from that. So he gives an example of if you're in an argument with somebody, our ego or our sense of protecting our identity or our thoughts about who we are might lead us to being really angry if somebody doesn't validate that for us, for instance. But as we get more settled and more grounded in our own life, we're not as vulnerable to other people's opinions or views or ideas about us. So it's not pleasant. We might still feel a lot of agitation or being stirred up. But, and I've done this with an ex partner, when there would be a lot of kind of agitation and elevation and activation in our discussion, I would just try to remain aware of my breath because I wanted to be present and not lash out and not say cruel things. And whatever she was doing was on her. But for me, I began to work with it as a practice. Can I remain open and present and grounded in the reality that there's this thing going on that's not pleasant, and I'm here witnessing it as well as taking part in it. So, just to bring to mind for a moment an example that you might work with in your own life, what comes to your mind when you think about that? So, acknowledging your attachments, resistances, and illusions, which are common, we all have them. The details may be a bit different, but we all have a huge stake in wanting life to be the way we want it to be. And we all have a lot of emotions around that, fear and wanting connection and all kinds of different feelings about that. And we all have that sense of, I need to protect myself. Just to take a breath and notice, are there a lot of examples coming to mind? Are you getting irritated? What's your experience? One of the things that comes to mind for me too is about knowing and realizing the self as we fully engage with life. Again, we're at that kind of opening into that knowing and realization as our nervous system is regulated enough. And as we have the stability to be present and be able to watch, okay, this is what's going on. I've been watching my mind. I'm familiar with my thoughts. I'm watching what's happening in my body. I'm starting to hold my breath, or I'm starting to heat up. And I'm able to stay engaged, but not out of control. Engaged, but also aware that this is what's going on. So at that point, we might not be kind of in touch with the capital S self. I find there's a lot of different steps. It's a continuum of how we work with that. The truth is that you are already what you are seeking. And of course, one of the things that often happens is we look at anything that's important to us is that we might judge ourselves or shame ourselves or feel grief about, all the times when, for me, I tend to go into freeze. So I might have grief of all the times I've missed out on connection because I've been kind of frozen. It operates in a lot of different ways, of course. Life is complex. And a big part of this is to be able to see our patterns with a lot of love and compassion for ourselves, to let ourselves be human. Let's think of a couple of examples of this. So we're acting from a place of awakening, love, integrity, clarity. And just for a few minutes to think about one example where you were acting with clarity and a different example where you were acting out old patterns. And this is something that I think is interesting to do with a longer space of time as well. And you might take it into the meditation that we're going to go into in a few minutes. But what are some of the elements? What are some of the conditions that support acting out of awareness? And what are some of the things that limit us? So, some things we've already let go of. None of us are at the beginning, we're all somewhere along on this path. So, what supports our realization? Our open heart. Sometimes it's helpful to bring to mind a challenging situation or something's going on that we really don't want to have happen. Might be in a relationship, it could be anything. And sometimes we're really stable and we act in a way that we're comfortable with and that I don't know, proud's exactly the right word, but that we feel like we acted with integrity. And other times we kind of lose it. What's the difference? What's going on during those times? Is it just intensity of the situation? Is it that you're really tired, or sometimes you have support, someone's got your back? Go back and forth a little bit between those two examples. Feel it in your body. I'm living from a place of truth and love. What comes up for you when you say that? Does it feel true? That's also a continuum. What helps with that? Part of what's going on there is if we're in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we have a much reduced capacity. We forget. Literally, we forget. We don't know our own kindness towards ourselves, towards other people. So a lot of this is real mammal body, nervous system stuff too.